Conscience rights. As the Trump administration takes steps to protect religious liberty, we address concerns that remain. Politics and faith. Lawmakers and church leaders talk about immigration reform. We're on Capitol Hill. Pope Benedict speaks out 5 years after he's retired. The 90-year-old describes his health and spiritual outlook. And short and sweet, Pope Francis has some advice for priests and their homilies on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, February 7, 2018.
This bill represents a significant bipartisan step forward.
Senate leaders reach a 2-year deal, budget deal, pumps money into military and adds billions to help victims of last year's hurricanes. It's unclear what will happen to immigrants brought to the U.S. illegally as children. Good evening from Washington, D.C. Thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The agreement is likely to be added to a stopgap spending bill passed by the House Tuesday. It's aimed at averting a government shutdown this week. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Democratic leader Chuck Schumer called the deal the best thing they've done for the middle class and the economy. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says it doesn't deal with dreamers, but he says the two parties will be able to debate immigration plans soon.
This bill is the product of extensive negotiations among congressional leaders and the White House.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell strikes a deal, and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer celebrates it.
After months of legislative logjams, this budget deal is a genuine breakthrough. After months of fiscal brinkmanship, this budget deal is the first real sprout of bipartisanship.
The budget would provide the Pentagon and domestic programs with huge spending increases. It would give $4 billion to rebuild VA hospitals and clinics, $6 billion to fighting the opioid epidemic, and $90 billion in overdue disaster aid. But the bill doesn't address the dreamers. And Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi says she won't back a deal without a fix for those immigrants brought here illegally as children. Pelosi today cites a statement by the U.S. bishops.
The bishops go on to say, the church has recognized and proclaimed the need to welcome young people. Whoever welcomes one of these children in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. Mark 9:37.
But the California Democrat has consistently voted against pro-life legislation in her 30 years in Congress, despite the bishop's countless appeals for the unborn.
House Democratic leader Pelosi held and is holding the House floor for many hours. She says she won't back the Senate deal unless Speaker Ryan promises the House will vote on protecting dreamers. Now, Tea Party conservative groups are blasting the Senate budget deal, calling it fiscally irresponsible, saddling future generations with debt. Lauren?
The Democrats, Jason, have always said the deal for dreamers is a must. Tell me what's happening there.
Yeah, Senator Schumer says he hopes Speaker Ryan will do what McConnell has done, promise a dreamers debate. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says that process will be fair to all sides, allowing senators to introduce their own plans and changes.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. This week, Cardinal DiNardo of Galveston, Houston, made an appeal to lawmakers as they work on immigration reform.
For us, it is important always that we welcome not just the stranger, we welcome the guest. They are guests, as it were, but they're really ours. They've been with us, and some of them when they were 2 or 3 years old or more. They know of nothing else.
DiNardo, who is president of the U.S. Bishops, accompanied Catholic groups to Capitol Hill earlier this week. He met with Senator John Cornyn of Texas. Prosecutors file felony charges against an immigrant illegally living in the U.S. who is suspected in the death of an NFL player. Manuel Orrego Zavala from Guatemala has been deported twice from the U.S. He is charged with causing death while driving, intoxicated, and leaving the scene of an accident. Police say his pickup truck hit and killed Indianapolis Colts linebacker Edwin Jackson and his Uber driver. President Trump drew added attention to this case, calling the fatal collision disgraceful. The Pentagon is reviewing plans for a military parade at the request of President Trump. The president witnessed a military parade in France on Bastille Day last year and called it one of the greatest parades he had ever seen. The White House says the event would allow all Americans to show their appreciation to America's service members. Joining us now, Chris Plante, host of The Chris Plante Show and former CNN Pentagon correspondent. Welcome back. A little garbling your introduction there. Excuse me. All right. The media are going crazy over this military parade story.
They are.
Nuts. Absolutely nuts. Senator Graham calls it cheesy. Secretary Mattis says it shows respect. Which is it?
Well, look, we've been at war for longer than we have ever been at war in the history of the country. We have millions of Americans that have served overseas since September 11th. President Trump was in France. He saw a parade. I don't hear liberals in the United States or the media condemning France for having their annual parade, and they haven't won a war since 1812. No, they've got people marching in the streets. They've got airplanes overhead, red, white, and blue contrails. Everybody has a nice time. They go off and have a glass of wine. It's no big deal. That's fine. Why not do it here? Show a little respect for the military. Look, the Democrats, if they're upset about it, can have an anti-military parade on the other side of town.
Ooh, boy, did I hit a hot button topic with you. All right, let's move on to DACA. The advocates are responding to John Kelly's comments, chief of staff.
Yeah.
He got into it a little bit by saying too lazy. They are too lazy or too stupid or too afraid to sign up for President Obama's plan. Right. So what is going to happen with this? You know, I talked to somebody yesterday who said, it was a Hispanic leader who met with John Kelly, saying he really understands immigration. Sure. And that he's not the bad guy here, is he?
Oh, of course not. He's a smart guy, he's a serious guy, and nothing gets you in trouble in Washington like telling the truth. So what the general said, what John Kelly said, White House Chief of Staff, is obviously true. There was a very generous offer made by the Obama administration. If you're in the country illegally, you can get square with the law, at least for the time being. All you have to do is fill out this form. And apparently 1.2 million people that were eligible to fill out the form didn't bother to fill out the form. I mean, if it were tax evasion, and they say, well, I have an amnesty for tax evaders, evaded taxes for the last 20 years, just come down and fill out this form. If you don't do it, if you don't do it, you're lazy. I mean, how obvious is this? And everybody, of course, the news media, it's racist, it's insensitive. It's obviously true. We should probably start with that as a point of consideration before we go off on these other avenues.
You know, you worked at CNN for a long time, and I was struck by the fact that they scooped up Josh Campbell, who was the FBI special assistant to the director.
Right.
Why did they hire him within 48 hours of him leaving?
It looked almost as though the arrangement had been struck before he announced his departure, and they have their flyers out in the halls of the FBI to join Josh as he heads off to defend the bureau at CNN. Now, I mean, honestly, it's another indicator that the FBI has been terribly politicized. Not just Josh leaving, going to CNN. It's pretty obvious where CNN's leanings are these days, and have been for a long time, but now more than ever. And it's just another obvious incident, another grain on that side of the scale that indicates that the FBI and the Justice Department have been politicized and not in favor of President Trump and Republicans. I mean, honestly, the FBI, which raised hell officially and unofficially about the Republican memo, the Devin Nunes memo being released last week, remained completely silent at the prospect of a memo 2.5 times as long being released by the Democrats out of the same committee. And anybody remember the Sherlock Holmes story, Silver Blaze, I think it was, the dog that didn't bark? The FBI was the dog that didn't bark on this, and there are red flags going up all over the place at the FBI.
We're going to have to leave it there. Chris Plante, host of The Chris Plante Show, former CNN Pentagon correspondent. We'll see you again soon. Thank you. President Trump's new effort to protect the rights of health workers who object to participating in abortions and other procedures will cost the healthcare system more than $300 million. That's according to a government estimate. Religious freedom advocates say it's about time. Critics say it's unnecessary. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Pro-abortion and gay rights groups say they're afraid clinicians could use religion as a pretext for denying care to some patients. The head of the new HHS division says conscience rights and religious freedom are finally getting the focus they deserve and pro-life advocates agree.
I think this is going to be money well spent.
Jennifer Popick works for pro-life advocacy group National Right to Life. She says the money it takes to start the Conscience Rights Division is not surprising, including an estimated $900,000 in annual government expenses.
And this is no different than the way we structure any other police force to enforce the law. You know, you have the law for a reason, and we do need people there to field complaints and to accurately follow through on them.
Those complaints from healthcare workers have increased.
The laws require you cannot discriminate against a person who objects to making referrals, performing, assisting in, or covering abortions.
Roger Severino directs the Health and Human Services Office overseeing the new Conscience Rights Division. He says between 2008 and 2016, there were 10 complaints related to conscience issues. Since President Trump's election, more than 40 complaints have been filed.
I think there's been a very big change of tone with the new administration. We are open for business. This new division is following on the president's lead at his Religious Liberty Executive Order.
Some Democrats are raising concerns about another HHS program, Title X. It directs more than $250 million for birth control and preventative health services to low-income women. Democrats want to make sure that money keeps flowing. An HHS official says, "We are committed to the women and men who depend on Title X services, and efforts are already underway to ensure that there will be no gaps in service while the funding announcement is finalized." Popick worries too much of that money will go to Planned Parenthood.
We don't want them in the trough of federal money here. I mean, this is no matter where you stand on abortion. Do we want an abortion provider to have access to so many millions of dollars?
That's a concern the new Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar, will have to address. He met with the president today to discuss other issues like health care reform, lowering drug prices, and combating the opioid crisis. Lauren.
Which is huge in this country, unfortunately. White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. At least 4 people are dead and 225 injured following an earthquake in Taiwan. Rescuers are fighting to save 5 people trapped in a building after the 6.4 magnitude quake hit. Around 140 others are unaccounted for. The National Fire Agency says the force of the tremor disrupted electricity and water supplies to thousands of households. 4 months after Hurricane Maria and still without power, some residents in Puerto Rico are taking matters into their own hands. Around a dozen communities in the mountains are repairing 300-pound power poles. Residents and officials say their homegrown efforts are part self-reliance and part frustration with the government. Nearly 500,000 on the island still do not have power. Tear gas was fired and several Palestinians were arrested after Israeli troops clashed with protesters in Bethlehem. The skirmishes follow Tuesday's death of a Palestinian man suspected in the murder of a West Bank settler last month. A historic diplomatic move less than 24 hours before the Winter Olympics begin. North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, says he's sending his younger sister to South Korea for the Games. It's the first time any member of the Kim dynasty has visited its neighbor to the south. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby has reaction from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. South Korean President Moon Jae-in is welcoming the decision. He says it shows the North's willingness to engage diplomatically. But American officials are more skeptical, including Vice President Mike Pence, who are focused on curbing the North's growing nuclear program.
Later this week, I will have the privilege to lead the United States delegation to the Winter Olympics. We'll be there to cheer on our American athletes, but we'll also be there to stand with our allies and remind the world that North Korea is the most tyrannical and oppressive regime on the planet.
Vice President Pence says the U.S. will announce the toughest and most aggressive sanctions against North Korea in the next few days. Pence joined Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Tokyo today before heading to South Korea. Abe says he appreciates the North-South Korean dialogue, but the North is still causing tension by holding a large-scale military parade tomorrow. The North Korean Supreme Leader's decision to send his sister, Kim Yo-jong, is being met with skepticism by many in the U.S. They see it as a charm offensive to keep the focus off of their brutal record on human rights.
Con il dialogo e nel rispetto reciproco, come anche lo sport insegna a fare.
Pope Francis called for prayers, saying peace is achieved through dialogue and mutual respect. The Holy Father welcomes the announcement that delegations from both Koreas will join together under the same flag and compete as one team. Almost 300 North Koreans, including a cheer squad and sports officials, arrived this week. This as South Korean authorities are taking action to prevent the spread of norovirus. Some 900 military personnel were deployed to replace the hundreds of security who got sick in Pyeongchang. Organizers say they are stepping up inspections on all food and beverage facilities at the Olympics.
Olympic organizers are also urging all of the delegates, including the athletes from the U.S., to practice good hand washing and personal hygiene. So far, though, there are no reports of any Americans catching the virus. Lauren.
Wyatt, I saw some hockey players in your piece. I understand some of those games will be hosted at a Catholic university in South Korea.
That's right, Lauren. Catholic Kwangdong University is one of two venues for ice hockey. It's located near the host city, Pyeongchang. The university has been around for decades as a secular school, but it was taken over by the local Catholic diocese and made a Catholic university just within the last 4 years. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Retired Pope Benedict XVI says he's on a pilgrimage home. Benedict wrote a brief letter to an Italian paper after readers inquired how he was doing. The paper published the note today, just a few days before the 5th anniversary of Benedict's stunning resignation announcement. That was February 11th, 2013. Alan Holdren is the EWTN Rome Bureau Chief. Alan, so many people are concerned about his health. What is he saying?
Well, Benedict said in response to the concern of readers of this Italian newspaper, he said that he is moved by their concern for him, that he feels sustained by this grace of so many people who love him. And as he's on this final stretch of the road and as his health declines, that he feels like he's close to God. The figure of Benedict XVI, who is so close to so many people still, even though he's living as a monk.
As a monk, you met with him last year. What is that like for him?
He's in a monastery. He's in the Vatican Gardens. It's a sort of a paradise, really, an oasis of silence and of prayer, where he's in the Vatican Gardens. We met with him on the 1-year anniversary last year of Mother Angelica's death, the foundress of EWTN, and we caught up to him as he was praying the rosary, just after his rosary prayer in the gardens. Really an amazing sort of a transformation from being someone who was seen by millions of people per year to really just being completely out of the public eye.
We're witnessing history right now with two popes living in the Vatican. Do they talk? Does Pope Francis come to Pope Benedict?
Yeah, every once in a while, Lauren. We saw him last, the two of them together just before Christmas, exchanging Christmas greetings. We've seen them periodically over the last 5 years for major liturgies, major masses, like the canonization of John Paul II and John the 23rd, two of their predecessors. They said that was a mass of 4 popes. We've also seen, say, the opening of the Holy Door for the Jubilee. We saw the two of them together right before Pope Francis walked through to open the Jubilee year. So it's very, very rare that we see them both together, but we know that they also catch up over the phone.
It's great. Our thoughts and prayers are with Pope Benedict. Alan Holdren, EWTN Rome Bureau Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, reading into things, we discuss the Democrats' version of events in the FBI's Russia probe. And on Eagles' wings, the Super Bowl champs and their powerful witness. The stock market continued its rally in the morning, rising nearly 400 points, but ended the day down 20. The Dow plunged nearly 1,200 points on Monday. President Trump has met with a top Justice Department official to review a classified Democratic memo on the Russia investigation. Democrats say the memo will refute allegations from a GOP memo criticizing the FBI's methods in the Russia probe. The dueling memos come as a Quinnipiac poll finds 53% of American voters believe the president attempted to obstruct the investigation. 83% of Republicans say he has not. Joining us now is Andrew Klavan, contributing editor at City Journal and the host of the podcast, The Andrew Klavan Show on the Daily Wire. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Is the Democratic memo going to make any difference in the Russia investigation?
It seems like a political ploy. It sounds like they put things in it that will have to be redacted and then they can claim it was all changed. I don't think that there's much that they can say that's going to get rid of the charges that are in the original Republican memo. I think those are here to stay. They sound pretty solid.
Let's talk about the media coverage of all of this. You immediately roll your eyes. I love it.
Well, it's bizarre. I mean, we have listened to decades of liberals telling us about the horrors of J. Edgar Hoover and his unjustified wiretapping, and now suddenly we hear a little unjustified wiretapping from the FBI.
Oh, not a big deal.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. And I think it's indicative of the way the press has turned a blind eye to the Obama administration and the way he turned the federal government into a Chicago-style machine that used cronyism and the levers of power to fight against his political opponents. They just didn't want to see it.
In terms of scandal, you rate the House Intelligence Committee FISA memo as a solid 7. Okay. What are we at the Olympics?
It's between a nothing burger and worse than Watergate. It comes in about a 7.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that it does show that the FBI deceived the FISA court in getting a warrant to spy on an American. And remember, they can go into his emails, they can go into anything he wants. And he was part of the Trump campaign about a month before. So it sounds to me as if they were looking at the campaign and spying on the campaign. If that turns out to be true, it'll be a 10. It'll go up from a 7. But right now it's about a 7.
Maybe a 9.5. Anyway, finally, you also write screenplays in Hollywood, and celebrities not only trash the president, they denounce him with such vitriol and hatred. You had a movie that Michael Douglas played in, so you know that world. Why such hate?
Well, it's a bubble. It's an iron bubble. It has become such a left-wing business and such a left-wing town that your career literally depends on your agreeing. And of course, psychologists have shown that when you're surrounded by people who agree with you, you become radicalized. They have now just gone so far to the left that they've really left the country. And Trump is very aggressive, and he's one of them, and they know it, and it drives them crazy.
Perfect. Andrew Klavan, contributing editor at City Journal and the host of the Andrew Klavan Show on the Daily Wire. Michael Warsaw, the chairman and CEO of EWTN, is honored with a prestigious award for evangelization. He was given the award during the 2018 Legatus Summit in Orlando, Florida. As he accepted the award, Mr. Warsaw said, "All of us as Catholics, and particularly those of us in Catholic media, have a responsibility to reach out to the peripheries of society and to address the needs of people who are living in spiritual poverty." He adds, "We need to share the beauty, truth, and goodness of the faith." Up next, Pope Francis and his tip for priests, and my commentary on Super Bowl champs, the Eagles, and their commitment to faith. Two court rulings in Ohio go against abortion clinics. The first agrees with the state's decision to close the final clinic in Toledo. The second ends litigation brought by a clinic in Cleveland, which challenged the legality of the state's abortion-related restrictions. The Vatican recognizes a miracle attributed to Blessed Paul VI, paving the way for his canonization. The miracle concerns the healing of an unborn child suffering from a potentially fatal disease. The mother traveled to the former pope's hometown in Italy and prayed to him. Her son was born in good health. The sainthood cause now goes to Pope Francis for final approval. And Pope Francis says homilies should not go longer than 10 minutes, or else the faithful leave Mass, ready, for a cigarette. The Holy Father says sermons should be well prepared and brief and open a dialogue between the faithful and God. He also has a message for churchgoers, saying we should listen to the gospel and then respond with our lives. Finally, a word about the Super Bowl. Rarely do actors and sports figures give interviews about their relationship with Jesus Christ. More rare is admitting they are weak and have struggles like the rest of us. We hold them up high like shiny trophies. Well, cue Super Bowl MVP Nick Foles, who said after Sunday's game that he wouldn't be here without Jesus in my life. What struck me in an interview with USA Today was his vulnerability as a humble human who celebrates his failures. Too often, social media makes our lives seem perfect to outsiders. Here's what Foles says. Failure is a part of life. It's part of building character and growing. Without failure, who would you be? He continues, I'm not perfect. I'm not Superman. We might have just won the Super Bowl, but we all have daily struggles. That's when my faith comes in. That's where my family comes in. And I think when you look at struggle in your life, he says, just know that it's an opportunity for your character to grow. I'd say Nick Foles scored a touchdown for Christianity. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. We leave you tonight with more images from today's general audience with the Pope. Good night, and God bless you.